Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest in the Elemental Talks series. And this afternoon, we've got a really interesting, fascinating presentation. We've got Mike Letchford, who is joining me here from IGS, which is Intelligent Grid Solutions. And Mike is going to be talking about the ideal conditions for life, which sounds a bit like we're interplanetary explorers or something here, Mike. It's almost as technical. I'm very excited. I'm very excited by it. I will hand over to you momentarily. I will just say to people listening in, please do direct your questions into the Q&A feature on Zoom. If you can't find that, there's a chat feature as well, but we'll do our best to get through as many of those as possible. We've got James and Valerie and people in the background as well who can help sort of typing some answers to you, and we'll have answers from Mike as well after your presentation. But for now, over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and great to be on this session this afternoon. As I say, probably a little bit about who I am. So Mike Letchford, I'm the Managing Director for Intelligent Grid Solutions. More about the business and our family of companies in a minute, but probably a little bit about me, probably just to set the scene, if that's okay. So, what's my background? As I'm a business guy that's, always been fascinated by, the pursuit of sort of market challenges and how our innovation aligns those market challenges to things like new technologies. So my background, can you believe, from the 80s, late 80s, is around things like auto ID technologies. So innovation in things like barcoding and auto ID, RFID, voice systems that are all about really trying to make the process of making things, supplying things in the value chain leaner, lighter, faster, to whoever the customer might be, either in a commercial or in a sort of retail environment. Most recently, actually before this current business that I joined, that culminated in moving right to the end of that value chain around workforce management. And I was really heavily involved for sort of 4 or 5 years in getting people in the right place at the right time to really drive that customer experience and ensure that you're getting the right attitude, the right kind of value from people in the workplace. So end-to-end sort of supply chain expertise is my background. And as I say, I've always been fascinated by the development of technology and its interaction with our everyday lives, probably most notably if you think about what's going on with the sort of current pandemic and COVID-19. So that's a little bit about who I am anyway. Moving into IGS as a business. So IGS is a family of 2 companies, and actually, it culminates and centers around an ethos of a innovative power and control platform, a world-class software as a service product that allows us to gather, manage, and interact and aggregate data, and then actually how we connect through using Internet of Things, IoT devices. So a full solution offering, which actually started off with under the banner of IGS as Intelligent Growth Solutions. So if we go back to actually the vertical farming piece of and the heritage of the company, and that's where this business began. And ultimately that has grown into the IGS business of Intelligent Grid Solutions, which is the part that I head up. And that's all about the smart space and the built environment and actually replicating some of that value into that space. So that's a little bit about how I set the scene. So for me, as I say, the most important thing for really is to give you a little bit of background about Intelligent Growth Solutions. It was born when a farmer actually met an engineer back in 2013, and this was all geared around the ability to create a world-class, indoor farming solution, really set to drive the challenges of, urbanization, and how do we create high quality, highly repeatable and sustainable crops local to the point of consumption, and how do we do that almost anywhere in the world. Hence the Intelligent Growth Solutions was born. Okay, this is all about trying to solve the puzzle of commercial viability of how we do that. So effectively, there was 2 key primary challenges in that vertical farming solution. Firstly, how do we actually collapse the cost of power to replicate the sun, the wind, the rain? So if you think about how we are trying to create ideal conditions for life inside a building, inside a vertical farm, and effectively trying to replicate the sun takes huge amount of power requirements. That led to the innovation, the development of a new power platform. And that was one of the key challenges towards the solution. Secondly, was obviously the fact that if you are now utilizing farming in a vertical sense, so you're stacking very, very high up in a fully automated building, Then removing the people from the equation was the other key challenge for this business. So they were the two key drivers for the vertical farm from a solution point of view. And actually our co-founder, somebody called Dave Scott, actually solved that puzzle with the automation and actually going back to basics with a power platform, allowing us to create this ideal conditions for life. Hence, what we call this solution is total controlled environmental agriculture environments. So really taking hold of that environment, removing any of the variables within the growing environment. And our aim was always, as I say, to produce very high quality, what we call excellent quality, economically and competitive, and environmentally sustainable. We call that the 3 E's within the business. So there are key values within the intelligent growth solutions. This obviously then started with, the consideration of if we've developed a power platform, and I'll explain a bit more about the vertical farm in a minute, then inherently in the way in which we are able to create ideal conditions for plant life, then of course, from that platform, you start to consider how that can drive a behavior and a solution and value into the built environment, otherwise known as the smart spaces. So by the ability to provide energy efficient and control within buildings. So whether that's commercial building property, whether that's in a retail premise, how do I create a more person-centric experience, and how am I able to drive a very sustainable message into that space? That's where the really key value comes from linking into smart spaces. So if I think about the world, at a much more global level, if we come back from the product and the solutions that we're trying to provide, I think there's probably 3 key things going on in the world at the moment in terms of those changing dynamics that we should all be aware of, that actually we can embrace what we're about within our business. Sustainability is at the forefront of those. So, the world issues around global warming, the sort of sustainability message, driving towards net zero, feeding the planet, right? So, we've got a global rising population, we have impending food shortages, and we need to be more resilient around how we supply food around the world. Obviously, that's compounded by, what's going on at a world level with COVID-19. So obviously from a sustainability perspective, we lead into that kind of health and well-being. Fundamentally, the world is a different place. We now consider what's happening around us on a daily basis and how that's really going to impact us, not at home so much. We feel secure, we feel, cocooned at home, but how do I now entice people back into the work environment? Health and well-being is such a forefront of everybody's thought process at the moment. And then effectively, the final part really for me is the kind of big data piece, often called Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution. This is about this overriding desire now to be connected wherever we are. We crave data, we crave the connection of information, and we've all become with billions of people around the planet, we've all become very much experts in our own right because we have one click away from actually being able to source the information we want. That has a huge pull on the demands from the global networks perspective, from the proliferation of data, from the use of things like the Internet of Things, so the connective of devices, how that proliferation takes place. And so for today, really what I want to try and talk about is how these 3 world conditions at the moment, or challenges, allow us to sit in, whilst we're not trying to solve them in their own right, the intelligent grid solution allows us to build a common platform that allows us to share, interact and communicate across all of these worldwide issues today. So, the intelligent grid solution is a platform that allows us to connect sensors, communicate, and drive a very sustainable power system that allows us to interact, as I say, at multiple levels. So let's just wind the clock back a little bit here and start to tell you a little bit about actually how the intelligent growth solutions works. So, you heard me talk a little bit about vertical farming. What does that really mean? Well, fundamentally, the story of IGS and the total controlled agriculture environment starts with a vertical farm. So if I try and put this into the concept of, the dimensions of how we grow crops today. So we think about the 3 dimensions of the wind, the sun, and the rain. Well, you can then replicate that quite simply into, heating, ventilation, and control inside a building. Yeah, you can then replicate that in terms of lighting, replacing the sun, and you can replicate obviously the rain in terms of hydration or hydroponics. So taking those 3 dynamics and allowing us to create a controlled environment where we manage those very, very prescriptively using unique recipes of light frequency, light spectrum, at particular stages in a plant's growth allow us to produce high quality, high resistance and repeatability inside a vertical farm. There is in fact a fourth dimension, and that is the use of the space, and that's key to the vertical farming. So how do I stop using large land masses to produce my crops? I can then consolidate those into a vertical farm. I can stack the growth area into vertical trays in a fully automated controlled environment. And by consolidating that space into a controlled environment, I can then think about where that vertical farm can be placed. So in an inner city, at a point where that's going to the production of crops, microgreens, fresh fruits, salads, are really then at the point of production. So at the point of consumption, sorry. So where that's next to a manufacturing plant, where that's next to a range of retail grocery stores where they are looking for fresh leafy green salads that aren't put into a bag with nitrogen, which then have a very poor shelf life. It actually drives a huge amount of value in terms of sustainability, reducing the fuel miles, obviously, because you've got the crop being grown at the point of consumption. And most importantly, you're using land otherwise that's been repurposed that couldn't be used for crops today. So, some of the key things when you think about the utilization of space for agriculture today is that we need to feed. We need to produce another 70% of food by the year 2050. So I'm just reading my notes here. In order to sustain the predicted population of 9 billion people. We can't actually do that with the land that's available today, and certainly with the way in which some of the land is being degraded by chemicals and by the misuse of agricultural products. In fact, agriculture is one of the dirtiest industries when it comes to pollution. So how to build a sustainable, repeatable environment to feed the planet over the next 30 years. That's one of the key ethoses of this business. So just moving on to actually how this works. Inside that vertical farm that you can see there, we have effectively full controlled environments. What you're seeing there is a range of 50 growth trays on a fully automated process that allow us to grow crops in almost a microclimate on each of those trays. So what you're seeing there is a multitude of LED lights that are controlling the frequency, the spectral control of each plant, allowing us to then give that unique recipe to the plant. Okay, as well as the light control, we're controlling the temperature by tray. So we've got about a 6-degree shift we can provide in temperature through the HVAC system, so the ventilation and control system. So we can grow individual crops on a tray by tray basis. So creating a very, very unique and tailored growing environment for a range of crops, multiple different crops within one tower. These towers are typically built in pairs, and it's a very modular design. So the concept being that these can then start with 2 towers and then multiply out. Some of the contracts that IGS have now secured range from 2 towers all the way up to 40 to 50 towers. So that modularity is designed to scale with your business. So actually the utilization of that technology allows us to power this lighting, sensing and control. I should touch on the fact that the irrigation is also then managed very, very precisely. So as I said earlier on, by controlling the fluids, controlling the lighting and controlling the ventilation, we can get an exact crop growth to the recipe that we expect with the repeatability time and time again, with no outside factors affecting it. That's really important, regardless of whether you're growing it in an urban environment, on a desert island, or within somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere where light is obviously a challenge. So, and then of course, not just within the vertical farm, obviously within a whole agriculture ecosystem, we have both what we call pre and post harvest. So how do I then also allow the crops to be managed in terms of from seeding through to harvesting, applying a similar technology? So the intelligent grid solution provides that platform for then configuring lighting, sensing and control, managing the data to ensure that as the crops are picked, as the crops are packed, and as they move from that kind of growth area into a packing and distribution cycle, that we can then provide that same level of control and same level of granularity in terms of those ideal conditions for growth. Fundamentally, it's about providing assurance of supply and control of the food value chain. Of course, just to explain how the grid works a little bit. So the intelligent grid is a very physical infrastructure. It's an extra low voltage power grid system that's designed to be very physical. It's mounted in a roof void space in a building, and it's designed to be able to provide the communication platform and the power to drive multiple different devices. So at its simplest level, that could be a light. It could be a sensor monitoring CO2 or heat or proximity, a range of sensors, often not described as IoT, but actually for me, let's just call them sensors for now, that allow us to provide a very tight closed loop and to provide that dynamic control of an environment. So effectively providing both power to the system in a very energy efficient way. And just to define that, energy efficiency can be anywhere from 20 to 30% over traditional ways of powering things. So copper cabled lighting systems, the intelligent grid is often expected to save more than 20 to 30% over that energy saving. When we bring a number of smarts in, what we call those, so daylight harvesting, turning the lights down when there's a lot of background light, changing the environment dynamically, turning lights off when there's nobody in that area, that brings in another 20 to 30% of saving as well. So that very dynamic control of the environment is what we're doing with the intelligent grid solution. Then, of course, actually, where we see the grid really developing as a physical infrastructure, as you can see in that image there. So in a large glass house or polytunnel, huge hectares and hectares around the world of covered growing space, predominantly around things like soft fruits, tomatoes, strawberries, where they still can use the daylight and the sunlight. But what people are trying to do now is top up that average day to really enhance the growth rate. So if you think about an average day, probably in the UK, of maybe 12 hours of sunlight, actually most crops can take up to 18 hours. So actually not only taking the variability out, so this time of year when you have a lot of cloud cover, getting that consistency of light to the crop, either dynamically through the cloudy day or topping up for a set 50% at the end of the day when the crop can take it, can really start to really increase those yields, right? So it's not just about the yield and increasing more crops from your available space, but it's getting that consistency, because those lighting conditions really do affect the favor in terms of sweetness and bitterness and things like that. This is where the total controlled agriculture environment comes in, and the use of the grid. So that's enough a little bit about our provenance and about intelligent growth solutions. Actually, what I really set the scene around was from plants to people. And actually, for me, this was all about really trying to join the dots from, a solution that was very much growing, and, our excitement about a lot of the new contracts that we're securing in vertical farming at a worldwide level, to actually some of the other things that are going in the market today. And what I describe as a kind of dichotomy against global sustainability and a hunger for power and technology. Actually, at a business level, you've got this constant drive now to be more sustainable as a business. How do I start to really think about lowering my energy consumption? How do I really start to think about my efficiency and strategies towards helping the planet, right? That's one of the key messages that any business at either a small or global level is trying to face. However, actually, ironically, we are all becoming much more connected, as I said. So, our desire, our power, our need on a global level to be more connected is prolific. So more and more devices, whether that's your mobile device, whether it's the way in which you connect with your friends, certainly the proliferation of this through the current pandemic has really seen the emergence of a lot of new innovative technologies. But fundamentally, each of those technologies uses quite traditional and quite inefficient means to power. And actually, the way in which we power our grid and power our solution helps to solve some of those. So on to actually what I'm really wanting to talk about in terms of from plants to people. So from my perspective, it's great that we've got this ideal conditions for life in terms of plants, but fundamentally for me, it's about how we take that intelligent growth solutions value proposition and how actually we've seen a huge amount of interest in the market from the built environment. So what you can see here is an example of the intelligent grid over what could be described as a shared office space or a built environment. Okay, so actually bringing that total controlled environment into the built environment is what we're trying to do. Okay, that driving a behavioral difference in the covered space. So people want to become we're trying to drive a more dynamic experience in a building. So can I help introduce new ways of sensing who's in the building, how they, what kind of mood they would like to sense in the building, and how can I interact with them on a very, very personal basis to drive that behavior inside the building. If we look at it from a business level, and one of the examples I've given here from a sort of facility management perspective is, they are looking to try and enhance environments across the world, whether that's on, retrofitting of buildings, whether that's on a new build scheme. inherently energy is at the top of their agenda as well. So how do I provide greater energy monitoring within the building today? That can be very difficult to do with traditional copper cabling and quite benign systems in terms of how buildings are run historically. But fundamentally, the third key point is then how do I link that into the kind of well-being of the people that are trying to work into that space? Okay. Clearly, it's about, our own current perception of getting back to work, for a population globally now that's, trying to think about how do we go back to the workplace. Okay. In terms of what's a safe environment for me to be in? How do I feel secure in my workplace? It's such a hot topic around the world today. The other key point within the built environment is the repurposing of buildings. So not only are people now looking to go back to buildings, to their offices, but how can I repurpose those? Many people are spending more time at home or repurposing their own working lives. So our office spaces become multi-tenanted, shared experiences that have to take into account different businesses, different kind of social habits, and different interactions. These are all things that are changing within that kind of working covered environment today. And so actually what we're really talking about here is the ability to demonstrate to employees that workplace is, a secure and robust environment. So, one of the first things from a safety point of view is that can I feel comfortable as I return to work that, the business has a healthy and robust cleaning regime. Okay. So that if I'm going into a shared building, in this case, whether it's a toilet block, whether it's a shared corridor, whether it's a shared cafetiere or canteen, then actually that I know that there's a means to actually apply those principles of a healthy, clean, and safe environment for me to work. The ability to do that means that you need some means of monitoring the environment. So, whether it's a shared meeting space, who do you know who sat opposite you? Do you know that whether they've that they've had access to the building correctly? Are you able to monitor their the status of that environment? Has it been cleaned every hour? What is the regime for maintenance and what is the regime for cleanliness into working in that environment? And actually this extends into probably what people would perceive as more intrusive activity, but there's a huge amount of work now being done around things like thermal imaging. The grid itself, once the infrastructure is put into a building, can have a range of IoT sensors on it. So whether it is cameras monitoring footfall in and out of an area for cleaning, whether it's CO sensors monitoring air quality or temperature sensing. Thermal imaging is something that's developed and has really seen a huge amount of development recently around can I provide screening for people entering the building. Now, you don't need to capture people's unique ID. We're not breaching any kind of civil liberty or personal information here, but just providing some high level ability to check temperature in areas, shared communal areas is a high topic for a lot of people in that built environment today. That's something that's very topical for what we're providing. And it does actually extend beyond the temperature and tracking through to even UV screening. There's a huge amount of development into this space now where ultraviolet light development at an LED level, which is safer to use than the traditional filament type lighting, allows people to provide cleaning when people are away from an area. So can I have sensors that say there's a no occupancy in an area, it's a high traffic common area? Can I then switch on ultraviolet light to help with the whole policy of cleaning and from an antibacterial perspective? All of these technologies are being developed and are looking for a common platform to be able to power and communicate and monitor and measure that data, because it's one thing doing it, but the ability then to be able to then capture that information, aggregate it together and provide it back to the building management system, back to the owner or the people within the building is key to what we're trying to provide. That's the value in what we're bringing today. And then from, as I say, just different areas within a building. So from UV tracking through to office management, through to from a secretarial or maybe a desk at the front desk, monitoring who's coming out the building to make sure that we've got full control over that environment. And then actually, where does this go in the future? Well, actually, if you think about the messaging I'm trying to make around well-being, then ultimately, a more environmentally friendly environment, that shared meeting space where people can really enjoy a better environment internally. So can I really start to consider, how even, what we see is the living wall type scenario today. So in the same way that you see us controlling the light and the wavelength of spectral control of lighting within a vertical farm, we're seeing a huge uplift in the inclusion of green spaces within buildings. Gone are the days where you see the single kind of yucca plant in the office building. True, very, very welcoming living walls, green spaces within shared buildings that actually you can interact with, you can relax with, and they can interact with the people around them. So the ability to change that lighting actually to help with the plant growth, so that you see a very, very inviting, very, very friendly, and very, very welcoming environment within the building. That's quite a futuristic thought, but actually starting to be adopted around the world today. And that kind of brings me back to the whole concept from plants to people and back again. Creating total controlled environments for both plants and total controlled environments for people is fundamental to what we're actually trying to do as a business. Taking away the uncertainty of things like the wind, the sun, the rain. Actually, in a covered environment, you don't have that choice for people anyway. So making it the ideal environment for people to feel like they can come back to work and that they feel safe, secure in the comfort of knowing that they're in a very, very friendly work environment. And so actually, where does that leave me after then? Well, actually, one of the other big areas of where I spent a lot of my working career is in the retail space. And whether it's the covered environment for people in a workspace or whether it's moving into a retail store. So if we think about the value within grocery retail particularly, then actually that value chain from the growth of the plants in the agricultural intelligent growth solutions, the securing of that supply chain. So can I monitor, can I control the environment within the assurance of supply? Can I actually then provide that provenance of the crop as the plants are supplied into the back of the retail store? Can I provide people in the store with a greater store experience, both from a perspective of understanding the provenance of those fresh crops? Can I have sensors that determine that, those bananas on that area are, not, there's nobody in that area, so reduce the lighting, helping to inhibit the ripening of the crops possibly. Can I turn a certain type of lighting on because I'm now monitoring people who are moving into that area? So highlighting promotions, providing a greater sensory experience for people as they walk into the store. So I think for me, the fundamental part of the retail experience is that kind of that blurring of the line now between the online shop and the in-store shop. I think it's really important to remember that actually, something like only 21% of retail shopping will be in store, will be online by the year 2030. It feels like we've accelerated that much quicker with the current pandemic, but actually in retail grocery alone, it's still only 5%. So what that really means is that a huge amount of people are still relying on that personal experience of going shopping. And so in the same way that in online, you get to see every single high level touch of what you do. We've all been, tracked effectively online and seen that we pushed promotions. Artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are really monitoring our spending patterns, our clicks in terms of where we're clicking, what we're looking to try and provide, where we're shopping. And so actually then, the ability to join that dot up with what happens in store. As you walk into a store environment, often not, you're more educated now than you ever were before. You've already researched the product online. You've already analyzed maybe or made that purchase through an online purchase, a click and collect scenario. Actually, what people are realizing now is that they have a heightened set of expectations when they walk into the store. But if you don't have that ability to have a personal shopping experience, then actually you've been underwhelmed and you've really lost that ability to capture either an upsell or capture the experience as somebody walks into the store. There's a huge amount of activity in this space today. So, whether it's monitoring people with footfall cameras coming into the building, whether it's, as I say, addressing particular lighting conditions for promotions. Historically, these kind of environments have taken days, if not weeks, to plan and set up. So actually with the intelligent grid solution, a new promotion area with a large grocery store could be reconfigured overnight by competent but not fully trained engineers. So the grid is designed to be modular and it's designed to be reconfigured so that I can reset the use of the environment very, very quickly. So, this is a huge value to a number of industries, most notably retail, where they have a lot of quick promotions. and they want to reconfigure areas without high cost and a long amount of time to do it. So fundamentally, how do I create that greater customer centricity and that shopping experience? So really that brings me full circle, really back to from plants to people and ideal conditions for life. So, total controlled environments, agriculture is all about that controlled environment and providing a progressive modern way to complement traditional farming. Okay, the sustainability and increased food demand increases. That inherently links into the total controlled environment for the built environment. Cities cover only 3% of the world's land surface, right? But they account for 7% of the carbon emissions, can you believe? So urbanization and the advent of smart spaces is absolutely a necessity. And we will see this become more and more a high topic. Just a quick leave you with the IGS numbers. And actually what we'd like to do is open up for some questions if possible. So as I say, at the moment, in terms of just giving you a heads up, we are a company that started back in 2013. We've gone from, a handful of people through to 70. Certainly, we took a Series A round funding back in 2019. That's seen 7 million come into the business. And effectively behind this great solution and team is 17 registered patents within 6 different families. So a huge amount of work has gone into building this business up. Exciting for me is the number of awards that we've already started to win, and actually the contracts that have already started to close in terms of those new customers that are seeing the value in this innovation that we're bringing. So I'll just leave that screen on there and open up for any questions if Ben, you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mike. Really appreciate it. Amazing presentation. It's a super exciting field. Forgive the pun. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of minutes if we've got questions now. We can also obviously share contact details and things with everyone who's registered to watch the audience. But if you've got questions, then I think someone's putting their hand up, but you can either type them into the Q&A or yeah, Steve, I can invite you up to talk here if you want to unmute yourself if you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and hi, Ben, hi, Mike. My name's Stephen Buzet. I work for a company that deals with the technology sector of 5G within the environment of air conditioning and the rest of it. And it's very interested in the horticultural side of things and how that all sort of works. You mentioned about the controlling of conditions within that environment and how that sort of interfaces with the likes of IoT and Industry 4.0. It's certainly a thing that I'm very interested in finding out a lot more about as we go along this sort of horticultural path. My main question is, how do you control that atmosphere, like humidification and things like that? Does that also appear on your systems in terms of a viewpoint?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Great question, and thanks for connecting. So, yeah, it's back to that key point, really, the total controlled environment, right? So we take out any of the variables, and we're able to control that. So, if you think about it at its most simple level, we have a range of sensors and devices that are controlling every aspect within that growth tower, right? Whether it's the vertical farm, or you could use the phrase a horizontal farm, a greenhouse. In the vertical farm scenario, we are monitoring each of those variables. So temperature, humidity, CO2, all of the range of those are then feeding us data dynamically into our cloud-based solution. So that has an AI engine or an ML, machine learning algorithms behind it that's saying, based upon a set number of conditions, based upon a certain recipe for growth. Let's say we're growing basil, right? And we want to grow basil to a certain type. I think there's multiple different types of basil. I think maybe something like up to 15 different variants of basil. Based on that recipe, the number of trays, the environment, we can control all of the aspects in that environment. So as the crop grows, the humidity increases, right? So we then balance that through the connection to the HVAC system. So we manage and we build, control that entire environment so that we adjust at a as a micro level, all the aspects of that plant's growth. So the watering regimes, the chemistry of the feeding, it's a closed loop. So I should actually state that the only thing that leaves that vertical farm is water, and the only way it leaves is through the plant itself. So it doesn't have a connection to a water supply coming in. It's reharvest, it's capturing all the fluids that are coming out of the crop, all of the hydration, all of the, from the humidity that's being recycled. So it's a fully recycling solution that's designed to be deployed anywhere. And so as I say, the only real wastage in that environment is the fluids coming out as a crop effectively. But we'd be more than happy to explore and explain that into more detail to you. If you do go to the Intelligent Growth Solutions website at IGS and look at something called the demonstrator video, we can send you the link to that anyway. Then actually there's a really great new video that shows the walkthrough of the farm and the vertical farm and how it is in operation. So I'd certainly urge you to do that. And of course, we can connect with you after this anyway.
Thanks,
fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve, for your question. I got another one here. We've got one from Brian about what is the algo solution lead time from contract to set up in a Caribbean nation? Well,
yeah, it's very interesting, actually. I know we have inquiries in the Caribbean, and I'm going to defer. I presume you mean on the vertical farming side. So inherently, these are a highly modular built system. So, they'd have to sit into a production schedule. So we're already deploying these on a worldwide level. So this is a real product being deployed today. And actually the constraints aren't, we supply it as a modular kit. We should absolutely be clear that as a technology innovator, as the producer, we're not going to be the grower. So there's a big element to this, which is finding the operator and the producers of the crops. We're not farmers, right? We are technology innovators, and we are providing a total solution to that operator. So we're looking for those operators in those territories, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's in the Northern Hemisphere, the top of Norway, whether it's down in the Far East, wherever it is, these can be deployed. In fact, there's a lot of interest in the Middle East at the moment. So some of the first contracts that are being developed, both on the grid side and the vertical farming side, are in the Middle East, because we can create those ideal conditions without the variables.
Great.
I'm not sure I answered the question of timing. We'd need to just look at how many towers. So, as I say, it's modular. So is it 2, 4, 6, 8 towers? And then when would they need to be deployed based upon our current implementation schedules?
Okay. Great, thanks. I think that's answered there. Brian, obviously pass on the contact details and with Steve and anyone else. If not, all I wanted to say is, brilliant, is that we've had a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Mike. If you want to, I don't know, share anything else, we will do with participants afterwards, and hopefully we will see everyone along soon, because there's a whole range of talks. I think there's something like 20 more talks coming up in the next couple of weeks, or on the Elemental site. So do go and check out what's happening there. There will also be a recording of this this presentation will be available on the site and on our YouTube channel very shortly afterwards. So Mike, thank you very much for your time and your insight, and everyone for listening.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.
No problem. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.